Hello, beautiful. Thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited. Today, I want to jump right in and talk about 10 things I have learned from doing artist taxes. Um, so first, it's important to know just a little bit about where I'm coming from here. I myself am an artist. I've been a working visual artist for almost 20 years now. I graduated from my MFA in painting program in 2005. And I have worked ever since as a professional artist. I'm represented by a gallery in New York and one in Asheville, North Carolina. And so that's a really important thing to know about me. Everything I know from the standpoint of why taxes and money are so difficult for creative people is because I have authentically felt it myself, right? And I went out and started the company I wanted to see in the world because I found it absolutely impossible to get good tax and business setup and financial information as a working artist. It felt to me like accountants, lawyers, business people just thought I was like some bizarre alien creature who would never understand anything they were saying and didn't even really attempt to speak to me like an intelligent individual or like somebody with a basic sense of organization. And it just felt too hard to get this information, not to mention when you're not even sure if what an accountant or lawyer is going to say to you is going to treat you respectfully or be relevant to your creative lifestyle. It can feel really scary to spend money on their expert advice, right? So there's kind of a difficult mismatch there. All right, so why do I know about tax stuff? That's a little funny, right? So not only am I an artist, but skipping over a long story that I will tell in a future podcast, I started a tax company, Sunlight Tax. So I have been doing artist taxes since 2016. And when I say artists, I just want to clarify, I don't just mean visual artists like me. Of course, I do the taxes of those people, but I also mean just creative people in general, creative people who are self-employed, right? So this is anybody who feels like maybe you didn't go to business school, maybe you don't feel like you quite fit in. You feel maybe like a weirdo, like a square peg in a round hole, that kind of person. So my practice, I do the taxes of a 100% creative clientele. And yeah, a lot of them are fine artists. But when I say artists, I mean the clients that I have and serve, and you, the listener who I'm talking to, is anybody who feels kind of weird, creative, and who works for themselves, right? So my clients have included tattoo artists, copywriters, online business owners, course creators, influencers, sex toy models, anybody who feels kind of like a weirdo, right? A creative weirdo who doesn't show up to work every day in khakis. I mean, I don't know, maybe you like khakis. Okay, so having done the taxes of this group of people for a long time, I've definitely seen patterns. And it's really interesting. So I want to share with you some of the insight I have gained from my tax practice, from looking through creative people's finances for so many years. Okay, number one, the first thing I want to tell you is there is no tax education in this country. That could not be clearer from speaking every day to creative people. Now, a lot of you may feel that it's your fault. You may feel shame about that. You may feel like you're behind. In fact, everyone feels like they're behind and they're the only one who doesn't know. But the fact is, there's a reason you don't know. Because you should have learned this. I think our country should actually teach taxes, basic tax education in high school, but we don't. There's some real reason behind that. If I'm honest, we allow lobbying in this country, and there are big tax and accounting firms that I can name, but feel a little nervous to name on my first podcast, who lobby the US government literally to keep our tax code complicated so that you have to buy their tax software, their bookkeeping software, get your taxes done through their organizations that are set up in every strip mall, etc. So, so the fact that there's no tax education in this country, the fact that taxes are complicated, it's not an accident. And it's not just you who feels that way, right? So that's number one. And it's really important to understand how universal that feeling is, that you are not the freak, right? The freaky thing is that we allow a system to exist this way. Now, I am a one-woman band trying to fix this. It's a little bit of a bigger project than I can probably do entirely on my own, but I am certainly here to tell you, you are not alone, and to try and make everything clear to you that I possibly can. All right, number two, the number two thing I have learned from doing artist taxes. Money is not neutral, right? We are told this big lie that money is some sort of neutral standard, that it is neither good nor bad. And that is true. Money is neither good nor bad. It is just a tool. And I think that's actually a really important attitude. But your feelings around money, what it says about you, how you feel about what you earn, this is not neutral at all, right? Money is how our culture values you. It is your status among your peers. Money is your relationship with your father, right? Those things aren't neutral at all. In fact, they're about as loaded as they come. So a lot of us have feelings when it comes to money, and feelings when it comes to taxes. Sometimes I get really surprised talking to a client about somebody's particular feelings, and it really opens my eyes. Just to give you an example, I was speaking to a Native American woman in New England, and we were talking about her just historic feelings about taxes. And she was saying that it's really triggering for her, the idea of the US government taking things from her. And I just thought, oh my God, I've never thought about it from that perspective before. Of course, like, and how deep, and what a historic trauma, right? So there's many different ways that money can kind of hit you in the gut. And you're just not alone with that. That is there's a lie. There's a lie that says that you shouldn't have feelings around this. It's certainly a wish of many accountants. They're not trained in the therapeutic aspects, but money is definitely not neutral. And you having feelings and shame and, self-worth issues around it, that's really real, and important to acknowledge. All right, number three, things that I've learned from doing artist taxes is that everyone has money shame. Absolutely everyone. I think the other side of this same coin is that, a lot of us feel like we're alone. A lot of us feel like I'm the one who's behind. I'm the one who doesn't know this stuff. But we also feel like I'm the one who's backwards. I'm the one who's like, who isn't enough, who isn't worthy of earning better pay than this, etc. And I'm just here to say that money shame is very universal. Almost every person I ever have talked to when doing their taxes has had some kind of money shame lurking in the shadows, whether we talk about it explicitly or whether it's below the surface. It is there. Okay. Number 4, rich people aren't happier. This is another really important one. Now, I actually think that a lot of creative people are hip to this. A lot of us go into the work that we do, our creative work in the world, not really because of money, without money as the primary driving factor, right? A lot of us are doing what we do for what I consider to be incredibly noble and wonderful reasons, right? We want to create beauty, connection, incredible experiences. We want to bridge divides. We want to put our product into the world, our service into the world, to fill a genuine need that only we can see. These things are incredible. These things are your superpower. And I want you really to feel how great that is. But it's really easy to believe that other people have it easier. I mean, obviously having money does make things easier. I don't want to gloss over that. But I think if you have it in your head that you would be happy if you were rich, I'm just here to dispel that rumor. It's just not true. I don't cater to wealthy people. I don't have that many of them in my practice. As you hear me talk, you will understand that I have a bit of an attitude on this. But I do have some. I do have some millionaires who I do their taxes, and people who make, massive, massive incomes. And I'm just here to say they're not particularly happy. They're certainly not among my happiest clients by any means. I think basically you're going to be the same person today or tomorrow. Um, and whether you have money or not, it can affect your stress level. Yeah. But it doesn't necessarily make your stress go down. Sometimes people are more stressed when they have more money because they have more going on or more responsibility. That is certainly the case with the people whose taxes I've done, not while I worked at my own firm, but at other firms when I was training, like I did the taxes of high paid corporate lawyers. And oh my God, you could not pay me enough money to do that kind of work. Not because I think it's inherently bad or wrong, but just because those firms treat the lawyers like they own them. And the people whose taxes I did, who earned salaries, in the $400,000 a year kind of range, they just were miserable. They had no personal life whatsoever. They could be called at any moment to do work for the firm. And because of that salary, that was considered acceptable. So I really personally value my quality of life. I'm pretty sure that you do too. And I'm here to say there's a lot of ways in which money doesn't necessarily equal quality of life. Now, of course, I want to acknowledge there are definitely things that money can buy. And of all of those, the one I want you to get the most comfortable with, because I actually think this can be a benefit in your life, is paying for things that other people do better than you, paying for experts to do things faster, more efficiently, and with fewer mistakes than you might. This really speaks to hiring out things. That can be whether it's, getting your taxes done somewhere, or having something fabricated so that you can, put on an incredible show. There's all kinds of ways where you might hire somebody. I'll give you a really concrete example from my own life. I had a lot of mental garbage around this, and a lot of shoulds that told me why I should not do this. But I found that I was observing myself on weekends. I'm an artist. I'm like maintaining an active studio practice, and I also run a sizable tax company. And I was finding that on weekends, I was really stressed out and feeling a little resentful because the house was a mess, because all week I'm like knee deep in work, like really using every single day to the max. I have 2 kids. So I'm using every day to the max to get my work done while my children are in school. And on weekends, I just found like the house was a wreck, and the groceries needed to be gotten, the laundry needed to be done. It was like all these chores that I didn't do on weekdays were left over on the weekends. And so I would find that I like had to scrub the toilet and I had to pick up. And it was often a choice between, do I clean up the house or do I spend time with my children? And this choice was leaving me feeling really, really resentful. I do just want to say for a second that I have a really awesome spouse, and this is not his fault at all. He definitely does do his share, more than, in fact. But that said, I still felt like I had stuff to do to run the household on the weekends. And it was either that or do a fun thing with my kids. And I always really liked that feeling of the household running smoothly. And so I would often do the household stuff, the laundry, the groceries, so that our house could function instead of hanging out with my children, reading stories, snuggling in a hammock, And finally, I realized, I have a mental hang up about hiring, somebody to come clean the house. I can actually afford to do this now. I've been running this company long enough. I have enough income where I can do that, which I recognize as a major privilege. But I personally felt like shame and, like stuff around that issue. So I hired somebody to clean my house. He's awesome. And now I get to hang out with my kids and do more fun stuff on the weekends. It has tangibly bettered my relationship with my children. Now that does get me happiness. There's no question. So that's a way where money does actually make me happier, but it doesn't take like some infinite, unattainable amount of money. It's a very concrete, like solid number that doesn't go up, right? So a lot of people I've found have gotten this kind of value out of money outsourcing a little bit of the admin tasks in their work, having somebody sort their email or do their schedule, or somebody, bringing their laundry somewhere so that somebody else is doing the laundry. I realize these things may sound like luxuries to you, and maybe they are at this point in your life, but I just want you to really examine what your feelings are about those things. And, a lot of you may have this feeling of like, oh, that's good for other people, but not for me. If you're having that kind of reaction, I want you to really think about where that is coming from. And if that is helping you, that attitude, or if it is just preventing you from having more time and spaciousness in your life. If, like me, it's preventing you from, like reading great chapter books with your kids or taking a trip to the swimming hole. Okay. So rich people aren't happier. That is absolutely for sure. Number 5, kind of the converse of number 4. It is possible to build wealth without a massive income. A lot of people don't really realize this. But I want to tell you 3 parts why this is absolutely true, and just what it takes to build wealth, to build financial security, without hustling more, right? Because what I see is so many artists, I'm skipping ahead here, so many people just hustle more to have more money. But what it does is makes you more exhausted and busy, and actually taking a little time and space to learn about your money and how to make a plan, use tax advantaged accounts, and develop the habit of maximizing those accounts every single year, year after year. That's how you build wealth without gobs and gobs of money, right? So to me, the key is making the most of the money you do have, learning the skills, building the skills to do that, so that you can rest, so that you aren't just hustling harder, right? Because hustling harder doesn't actually really help you. It's very short term, but over the long term, you will burn out. So all it takes, and I say all, there's skills, it takes some effort, but what it takes to build wealth without a massive income is maximizing the money you have. And again, I'm going to repeat myself, but that requires a plan, right? You have to know it's coming. You have to map it out. If you find out, if you are only thinking about the deadline to put money into your IRA the day before the deadline, you probably don't have that money sitting around, right? Unless you have a substantial amount of wealth to begin with. If you don't have such huge amounts of money sitting around, you have to know when that deadline is coming way in advance of it and set aside the money systematically over time. This is totally possible. It's not that difficult. It's just a thing that takes a little bit of brain power, a little bit of planning, right? Second, you have to use tax advantaged accounts. I will do at least one entire podcast on tax advantaged accounts, but the upshot here is that there are all kinds of things in the US tax code that the government actually creates incentives for you to put more money into certain types of account. These are generally for the public good, things like retirement, the education of your children or yourself, funding healthcare. There are a lot of tax advantages in these areas, not because it's some tax scam or slimy, skeezy thing, but actually because the government wants you to do these things. It is actually a public good when you have set aside enough money to pay for your healthcare, when you have set aside enough money to go back to school, or to send your kids to college. When you, and here's the biggie, when you have set aside enough money for you to retire. I say this with some deep personal experience. I was in AmeriCorps and I used to work in a state-run retirement home. And the government basically doesn't want you to end up in one, right? If you don't plan for your retirement, ultimately it will fall back on the US taxpayer. And so it is actually in the benefit of the US population for each one of us to fund our retirement. It is not just for your benefit, it's a societal good, which is why we create tax advantaged accounts that make it a lot easier for you to put this money aside and actually give you enough tax savings that you have more cash available to put into them every single year. The third element of building wealth without having a massive income is habit. So the habit is basically just you want to max out all the accounts you have access to every single year. That's your goal. Are you going to be perfect? Are you going to hit it every time? No, and that's okay. Perfection is not necessarily the goal here, but you always want to aim for improvement. So the habit is just you want to set aside this money every single year so that every single year you have maxed out these accounts. That's all. And it takes some planning so that if you're on a modest budget, you put aside enough each month so that you have that full pile available when the tax deadline comes for you to put the money into the actual account. I have seen with my own eyes, people with very modest, lower middle class incomes set aside enough money to retire on, to send their kids to good colleges, because they use these accounts every single year. So it is absolutely possible for you. And I want you not to write it off or dismiss it as a possibility because you don't have what you feel like is tons of money. I want you to realize that there's a real economic incentive built into our tax code that makes these things possible, but you can't use them if you don't know how they work. All right. The sixth thing that I want to talk about that I have learned from doing artist taxes is very related to number 5. It is that people do not know the benefits of an IRA. Now, an IRA is just one of several options for retirement funding. It is one kind of tax advantaged retirement account. And what I see, this is very unscientific, but in my head, as a sort of rule of thumb, what I generally see a person of a sort of middle to upper middle class income tax bracket save when they max out an IRA for the year is about $1,000 to $1,500 per year. Now that can actually be more if your state also gives a tax benefit. Not all states do. So Massachusetts, no tax benefit for your IRA. New York, a great tax benefit. And anytime you have a higher tax bracket, it means that your savings is even more when you put money into a tax advantaged account. So yes, that is an example of a regressive tax. A regressive tax is one where someone with a higher income gets a bigger benefit versus a progressive tax, which is where somebody with a lower income gets a bigger benefit. And there are things like that in the tax code too. It's not completely one-sided. Our graduated income tax levels are actually an example of a progressive tax element within our system. Okay, so basically my baseline though for an IRA is that people often get, now I'm not saying you specifically because I would need to look at your numbers to know that this is true, but people will get about $1,000 to $1,500 of savings from putting $6,000 into an IRA. That's very rough math there. But think about that. When you get savings of $1,500 for putting in $6,000, look at that proportion. That's huge. That means you're actually only having to come up with $4,500 of cash to have $6,000 in an account. That is really good. So it's really worth noting how big the benefit is when you use tax advantaged accounts. I think a lot of us have never, like I said, I'm going back to point number 1, there's no tax education in this country. But when you know about how big the benefit is, it suddenly becomes a little more exciting. Oh, shoot, I totally could max that out. That's not as much as I thought, right? That's the point. That's what I want you to get excited about too. All right. Number 7, when artists hit it big, they become exhausted. Ugh, this is a tough one. So a lot of us look at our friends, our peers whose online business suddenly blows up, gets a whole bunch of press, or an artist or performer who suddenly gets popular. You see them everywhere. They get the big record deal, they get the book advance, the book deal, or they get the museum show or the big grant. What I have seen many, many times over doing the taxes of creative people is, taxes are an annual thing. So I will see the same people year after year after year. So I will see how they move from this to that, to this to that, and how their income grows. Usually it is growing. What I see is that a lot of times when an artist kind of hits it big, like does the thing that we all get jealous of, right? Does the thing we all hope for, that when I talk to them, and I'm subject to this too, right? I'm a human being. Like I get jealous of my own clients sometimes. I'll see them get all these big museum shows or the MacArthur Genius Award on occasion. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm so jealous. But then you talk to them and they're getting no sleep. They have all these contracts they now have to fulfill, and they're not used to outsourcing a lot of their work, right? Because we are so used to, as creative people, being undervalued, underfunded, working with less, working on a shoestring, that we have a real resistance to hiring out stuff that people in another business would know they needed to hire out, know that it was logical at this point to hire out the administrative tasks when you're super, super busy, for example, or, the laundry and the house cleaning if you're super, super busy. So I have definitely had many conversations. I'll give you an example of one client. And just FYI, I will never identify any tax client on this podcast without their express written permission. That is an obligation I take very seriously. So if you hear me talk about details of somebody's life, I am probably anonymizing it to a degree, and I may be changing certain identifying details. But this client that comes to mind when I talk about this is a public artist whose work is super, super cool. And she has worked in multiple countries and just gotten hit it really big, got a lot of press, has gotten a whole bunch of public art commissions. You see her work everywhere on Instagram, these really big museums and public places. And it's really impressive to follow her on Instagram, to see her work. And then talking to her, she just sounded so exhausted. And I was like, wow, your income has increased so much from the prior couple of years. But it seems like you don't have any time. And that was really her primary concern when she was talking to me, that she just had no time and no ability to rest. So I just want to point out that it's really easy for us to think about only the good side of what we see in our peers and to feel really jealous, whether it's the fact that they have more money than us or they have better career success. But I just want to tell you, there is another side to that. And if it happens to you, I just want to lay the groundwork here that it's really beneficial to work on your mindset surrounding money, and doing things like hiring out work that other people can do better than you, or more quickly than you, or cheaper than you, and really trying to focus down, when you gain the resources for it, on doing the work that only you can do, the place where you uniquely add value. Because when you do that, you really can be in all those places at once. If you are not outsourcing, it's really hard to do that, and you will just find yourself exhausted. That is the path to burnout. And that is how you burn bright like a shooting star, and then you fade away because you just cannot sustain that. So this idea of actually using your money to amplify your work, it really does force you at a certain point in your career to think about hiring, to think about what are the things that an expert could do more quickly or efficiently, that could get me there faster. And what could I hire someone to do so that I just have more time to rest? Okay. So the other side of rest is retirement, right? That's the big rest, right? So funding your retirement using those tax advantaged accounts, having that habit, having a plan, that's the other side of this, right? You can rest when you have FU money saved up. I like to call retirement money FU money because it's just so much sexier. And it is the same thing. So there's two sides of rest, right? There's having savings, having a big cushion that you can lean on and rely on that allows you to take time off if you need to, which is so important because things happen. You could get in a car wreck, you can have an illness, you could have to take care of someone in your life. Things can happen in this world. But the other thing is when you get busy, when you start hitting it big, realizing that your time has a limit, right? Even Beyonce only has 24 hours in a day. So there is a point where it's really worth it for you to start outsourcing stuff and thinking about what is the one thing I need to do? What is the stuff that has to stay my work? And what is the stuff that I can push out? All right. Number 8, accountants are bad communicators and people don't read tax documents. This is a big one. This is probably not a mystery to anybody listening to this right now, but it is so true. Oh my goodness. When people come to me, I just cannot believe how ill-served so many people are by their accountants. Accounting is hard work, but I think accountants are not taught how to communicate, right? They're not taught sort of broader issues of like creating value in a firm or affirming their client's experience, right? So a lot of accountants just do the accounting, they hand over the document to the client and they think they're done. The client gets that document and okay, sure, like the boxes have been checked, but the client has no idea what happened, right? I talk to so many people who have no idea what's inside their tax return. And I don't think it is entirely your job to read your tax return. It's a good idea. I'm not saying don't do it. Like you should do it. Yes. But I do think that it is, if you're paying for an accountant, it really is important that accountant talk to you about what it means, that they define terms, that they don't speak to you in accountantese, that they actually break things down and tell you what issues are affecting you. This is a problem of many professions where people talk, the professional will talk to the client like they talk to other professionals, and the person who's a lay person has no idea what's being said. I mean, this is common everywhere. I mean, artists do this, right? I've read so many terrible artist statements that sound like an artist talking to an artist and not an artist talking to the public, right? I mean, so this goes many directions. But I do think that the accounting profession is particularly shy and particularly bad at handling those emotions, that shame, those things that come up surrounding people's numbers, and explaining the frankly pretty scary sometimes communications that the IRS sends to clients. On the flip side, people don't read their tax documents. I mean, this is a fact too, right? I think if we funded the IRS properly, I think that we would we would have better design of tax documentation and better copywriting and, like more study put into how taxpayers receive their information. And I think that would be a great thing. I would love to live in that world. We don't live in that world. But a lot of times what's really interesting is that if you fill out a tax form, there's often instructions, and the IRS has been getting better at going through these different forms and making the instructions more understandable. So just a quick tip I can leave you with here is that You might actually have the answer sitting right there, 3 pages deep in the document you're looking at. To give you an example, the W-9. So the W-9 is the tax form you fill out when you do contract work for someone, when they're going to issue you a 1099. Quick mnemonic device for you. The nines go together. W-9 goes to the 1099. So when you fill out a W-9, a lot of people have questions. People will even pay me and book my time to answer questions on this, which they could have found right on the form. I'm happy to take your money, but I'm telling you, you don't need to spend it. You can look at the W-9, and most of us just print off the first page and hand that back to the person. But actually, there's several pages behind it, which actually go in some pretty good detail into answering how you should answer box 1, box 2, box 3, etc. Right? So a lot of times the answers are right there in the instructions and you will see them. But I realize that tax documents are so intimidating and not designed in a very friendly way that it feels like it's all a mystery. And so we don't even look, right? Okay. That said, I hope to teach you on future podcasts different things that you can find in your tax documents, because they are a resource that you have right at your fingertips. And there is really good information that you can get out of your tax returns. All right, we're coming close to the end here. So number 9 of what I've learned from doing artist taxes, self-employment tax. This is a real biggie. Self-employment tax is probably the number 1 most misunderstood element of a freelancer's taxes. I find that when people get a really big tax bill that they were not expecting, almost always the culprit is self-employment tax. I think we all have an intuitive sense of income tax. Some percentage of my income is going to be subject to income tax, right? We kind of know that in our gut. But self-employment tax, and this goes back to the fact that there's no tax education. So this isn't your fault. It just is a fact that we don't get educated in this. But self-employment tax is a really big factor in anyone who is a freelancer's taxes, right? If you are self-employed, you're subject to self-employment tax. Self-employment tax comes on top of your income tax. So it's not enough to calculate what income tax you're going to owe on your freelance or your business income. You have to also factor in your self-employment tax. Self-employment tax is 15.3% of your profit, always and forever. And all of you have the same rate, unlike income tax, where you all will have a different rate because it's based on all of your income. So self-employment tax is how freelancers pay into Medicare and Social Security. It's really important to know that it exists. It's also meant to have parity with W-2 employees. So when you are an employee, if you left a day job, or if you've ever had a day job, 7.65% of your pay was taken out to go to your Social Security and Medicare. The part you saw that on your tax forms, on your W-2 or on your, pay stub every month. But what you didn't see is that your employer was paying an equal portion of your Social Security and Medicare. So your employer was paying also 7.65% of your pay towards Medicare and Social Security, but you never saw it on your W-2. You never saw it on your pay stub because it wasn't your money. It wasn't coming out of your pocket. That equal number was actually coming out of your employer's pocket. So here's a little piece of civics for you. In our country, the way we've set up our tax code is that the worker and the employer equally share the obligation of paying into that worker's eventual retirement benefit, which we call Social Security, and eventual healthcare benefit, which we call Medicare. So you only had to pay 1/2 of that, only the employee half, when you were an employee, if you were one. When you are self-employed, so if you quit your day job and go all in on starting your own company, doing your own freelance income, gigs, becoming a contractor or a consultant, now you are responsible for both halves. Why? Is it because the government wants to punish you? No, not at all. It's because you're the boss now. So you have to pay the boss half. And before you get upset and feel like, oh, I'm double taxed, that's not fair, I want you to remember that the other half of that deal, because most tax things have both a benefit side and an obligation, your pay, the thing that you get in exchange for paying the boss half of Medicare and Social Security is you now get to deduct expenses, right? Like your boss does when you're their employee. Employees don't get to deduct expenses at all, right? But when you're self-employed, you do. And that is because you're the boss. So yes, you are now paying the boss half of Medicare and Social Security on top of the employee half, but now you get the boss deductions too. So feel good about that part. I hope you do. Anyway, I don't want to tell you how to feel. All right. But it's a really big factor in your tax return. If you just heading back to that idea that most freelancers don't factor in self-employment tax adequately, and it is the cause for so many surprise, bigger than I expected tax bills. If you just think about it, if you are earning income, 100% from your self-employment, and let's just say you're in a 20% tax bracket, right? You might intuitively think, oh, 20% of my profit is taxed. Sorry, I'm going to pay 20% tax on my profit. Well, that would be partially true, but not completely, not enough, because on top of that 20% income tax, you'll also pay 15.3% self-employment tax. So instead of a 20% rate on that self-employed income, you're actually paying 35.3%. I just added 20 and 15.3% together. So that's a larger portion of your profit than you may have factored in mentally. So it's really important to get your head around this component of self-employment tax when you are a freelancer, when you work for yourself and have your own company. Okay. The last one, number 10, quarterly taxes are confusing. That's an understatement. Basically, when you are freelance or when you are self-employed, you have a small business, when you're a sole proprietor or single member LLC. If your tax bill is over $1,000 for the year, then you actually trip into a system where you now have to pay your taxes, not annually, but you have to pay quarterly. So quarterly taxes are a really big deal. They're actually a good thing because it's a lot easier to pay a quarter of your tax bill than to pay the full tax bill. I hope to do future episodes on quarterly taxes. There's so much more to say, and they're pretty complicated, so they deserve a lot of space. But I will say this, they're hard. They're hard to get started with, especially once you have a chance to practice them over time. You do tend to be able to refine and adjust, and it gets better. But starting out, calculating and paying your quarterly taxes is, for a lot of people who work for themselves, very, very confusing. So those are the things, those are my top 10 things that I have learned from doing the taxes of artists, designers, creative people who are self-employed. I hope that this has been really helpful for you. I have a couple of resources that I want to point you to if you resonated with any of this. First of all, if you like this episode, if you found this valuable, I would be so honored if you would rate and review and subscribe to the show and share it with a friend who could use the information. That is super helpful to me, and I'm so grateful. If you want to go deeper, if you're realizing that these things kind of hit the nail on the head, then I welcome you, first of all, to download my free visual guide to your tax deductions. It is a way to kind of jump into this work painlessly. I have a one-page, beautiful, colorful visual guide to tax deductions at sunlighttax.com/deductions guide. And I also have a masterclass that talks about the 4 most common mistakes I see freelancers making when it comes to their taxes, and my framework for how to get your taxes on track, how to pay your quarterly taxes, and how to build a freedom fund, that FU money. So if you're interested in that, it has a pitch for my program at the end. and a special bonus if you feel compelled to join. You'll get a lot out of it without that. But if you do, it is at go.sunlighttax.com/register. I want to tell all of you what I say at the end of every tax talk I ever give, which is this. In today's world, I think that we are more divided than ever. It's like we've forgotten how to talk to each other, and those divisions feel deep and they feel scary. And when I feel depressed and anxious about that fact, what gives me hope is people like you, because creative people are the empathy muscle of our culture. You exercise your empathy over and over again. Design is empathy. Art is empathy. Creative businesses solving problems are empathy. And you are the people creating amazing experiences, whether it is beauty, whether it is connection, whether it is building bridges or showing people a perspective they've never had before. You are creating solutions that make the world better from your particular vantage point. And you are also the visionaries who show the rest of the world what better world is possible. So from the bottom of my heart, I want to thank you for doing the work that you do in the world. It is so important, and I hope you keep doing it. So thank you so much for listening to this, my first episode, and I will see you on the next one. Thank you. Bye-bye.